We've got some real conversations to have after Cincinnati's Week 12 stumble against the Patriots, 26-20. It wasn't just a loss, it was one of those games that forces you to stop and ask, where does this team go from here? We're diving into all of that. We're talking roster direction, quarterback decisions, and a couple of important draft projections from ESPN and CBS that could completely reshape the Bengals' future. But first, let's address the biggest headline of the night. Joe Flacco, that sure felt like a goodbye. In his post-game presser, Flacco sounded like a man who knew his time as the Bengals starter was wrapping up. And honestly, he deserves credit. Since stepping in, he's given this offense steadier play than Jake Browning delivered earlier in the season. The wins didn't pile up, but the poise and leadership were there. And now, with Joe Burrow inching back toward full strength, all signs point to his return coming this week, likely in that massive Thanksgiving showdown against the Baltimore Ravens. The timing couldn't be bigger. But let's be real, the formula hasn't worked. Cincinnati finally picked up that lone win over the Steelers, but too often the defense faltered early in the season, and over these last 2 weeks, the offense simply couldn't finish drives. And before we continue, quick reminder for all the real Bengals fans out there. Before we get into the latest Bengals news, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and don't forget to smash the bell icon so you never miss an update. Alright, let's get back to it. The AFC North picture isn't pretty. The Ravens handled business today. Pittsburgh slipped. The Bengals dropped to 3-8. And with Cleveland up big late in their game, Cincinnati is staring at a tie for last place. Let's be honest, if Burrow comes back, that's great for momentum, but the Bengals would have to win out to even make the playoff conversation interesting. And when you look at the remaining schedule? 6 games left, 2 meetings with Baltimore, starting with a short week road game on Thanksgiving night. Winning out isn't impossible, but it's close. And it doesn't get any easier from here. After Baltimore, the Bengals still have to walk into Buffalo, a place where visiting teams rarely leave smiling. That matchup alone is a mountain. And even though the final stretch of the schedule softens a bit, the Bengals aren't at a point where anything feels automatic. Right now, almost every opponent looks capable of giving Cincinnati problems. That's the reality of sitting at 3-8. Even a perfect 6-game run to finish the season feels incredibly far-fetched. And even if they did pull it off, would 9-8 really be enough to win the AFC North or squeeze into a wildcard spot? It doesn't look that way. So the real question becomes this: who should start at quarterback on Thanksgiving night? If I were standing on the sideline with the headset on, I'd seriously consider Jake Browning. Not because he's the long-term answer, but because the situation demands caution. Flacco has given this team everything he could, but the injuries are stacking up, and the results simply aren't coming. Burrow is improving, but rushing him back into a short week, high-intensity divisional battle? That's playing with fire. And let's be real, even if Burrow could drag this team to a couple of extra wins, those wins might end up hurting Cincinnati's draft position more than they help the current season. That's where the Bengals are right now. Stuck between the desire to compete and the reality of what this roster has endured. And the situation gets even more complicated with the injury to T. Higgins. Another major weapon likely unavailable on a quick turnaround. Losing a target like him, especially in an offense already struggling to finish drives, only makes Thursday night even tougher. A concussion on a Sunday rarely clears in time for a Thursday kickoff. It's just how the timeline works. This is the hard truth: the Bengals are climbing into one of the toughest games of their season, possibly without their full receiving core, possibly without clarity on their starting quarterback, and definitely without any margin left for mistakes. T. Higgins going down today was one of those moments that freezes an entire fanbase. The stadium went silent. Anytime a player stays down that long, especially a star like T, you hold your breath. Hopefully the symptoms aren't as severe as they looked, but with a Thursday night turnaround, the odds are stacked against him. As of right now, it feels much closer to doubtful than anything optimistic. Now, let's shift to something that is becoming increasingly important for Cincinnati's future: the NFL Draft. Both ESPN and CBS recently released updated 2026 mock drafts, and the Bengals landed in slightly different spots depending on the projection. Matt Miller from ESPN slotted Cincinnati at number 8, while CBS placed them a pick later at number 9. These mocks were released before this weekend's results, so the exact order may shift, but the names attached to the Bengals are still worth paying attention to. Let's start with ESPN's board, where the early portion featured a few trade-adjusted selections. The Bengals' focus in Miller's projection was simple: a premium edge rusher at number 8, Kellrick Faulk from Auburn. And honestly, that direction makes a lot of sense. This Bengals team desperately needs more consistent pass rush juice, especially with how often opposing quarterbacks have picked apart Cincinnati's defense this season. If a high-upside edge talent is on the board when the Bengals are on the clock, it wouldn't be surprising at all to see them pull the trigger. There are multiple edge prospects in this class who could fit what Lou Anarumo wants: length, burst, discipline, and the ability to disrupt the pocket on their own. Faulk is one of those players, and seeing him mocked to Cincinnati this early signals that he's climbing draft boards fast. Kellrick Faulk is one of those names that keeps gaining steam, and honestly, it's no shock. He's been rising into that upper-tier first-round conversation for weeks, and ESPN's Matt Miller laid out a pretty clear explanation for why he fits the Bengals so well. The biggest factor? Cincinnati's edge group could look completely different next year. Trey Hendrickson's future remains unsettled as he enters free agency. Joseph Ossai and Kem Sample are set to hit the market as well. That's a large chunk of the rotation potentially walking out the door. Even with Shamar Stewart taken early this year and Myles Murphy drafted back in 2023, either has produced the kind of impact the Bengals hoped for. That's exactly why Faulk becomes a natural target. At 6 feet 6 inches and nearly 285 pounds, he brings a build and play style that mirrors what made Hendrickson so dangerous: power at the point of attack paired with enough burst to collapse the pocket. 2 sacks and 24 pressures may not blow up the stat sheet, but the versatility to rush inside or outside is what makes evaluators pay attention. And really, Cincinnati needs production, not just potential. An edge rusher with real numbers and real flashes on tape? That's the kind of investment that makes sense for where the Bengals stand right now. With all that said, here's the question every fan can debate: if the Bengals could draft any player in this class, regardless of pick, who's your dream selection? Quarterback, edge, wideout, offensive line, whoever it is, who's the one prospect you would sprint the card in for? Drop your pick in the comments. I want to know who you're riding with. Now let's move over to the CBS Sports mock draft from Ryan Wilson. He released several versions, but this one stood out because the board lined up a bit more favorably for Cincinnati. His mock began with Fernando Mendoza going first overall. The CBS Sports mock continues with a string of offensive firepower and defensive talent flying off the board early: Ty Simpson at number 2, Dante Moore at number 3, Spencer Fano strengthening Miami's offensive line at number 4, and Carnell Tate bringing more explosiveness to pick number 5. From there, Arl Reese, Peter Woods, and Francis Mauigoa rounded out the top 8. But here's where it gets interesting, and why this version of the mock stood out. At number 9, the Bengals select safety Caleb Downs. If that scenario becomes reality, Cincinnati shouldn't hesitate for even 1 second. Downs is one of the smartest, most instinctive defensive backs in the entire class. And while safety isn't usually considered a premium draft position, which often causes elite prospects to fall further than they should, the Bengals being in range to grab Downs would be an absolute gift. This pick would also come with built-in chemistry. Pairing Caleb Downs with Jordan Battle makes perfect sense. The two already shared the field at Alabama during Downs' freshman season, and their communication, style, and understanding of the game complemented each other perfectly. Reuniting them in Cincinnati would stabilize the back end of a defense that desperately needs leadership and reliability. Downs' resume speaks for itself. Nick Saban trusted him as a freshman, and that alone tells you everything you need to know about his football IQ. His time at Ohio State has been strong as well. Even if his numbers dipped a bit this year, that was more about his role than his performance. They've asked him to do different things, and he's delivered. If Caleb Downs is available when the Bengals are on the clock, the choice should be obvious. You take him. Period. But now it's your turn. What position should Cincinnati target in the first round? Edge rusher? Safety? Offensive tackle? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to see what direction Bengals Nation is leaning.